looking for the rest of the members of the conference to gather in, I'll just introduce the panel. I'm your chair. My name is Donna Hope. I'm here at this University of the West Indies Mona campus, and we are supposed to have 3 papers. So one of our papers was accidentally presented in the previous panel. Kerry Johnson has already presented. So we have 2 papers that are going to be presented by 3 gentlemen here. We have Daniel Johnson and Roy Wallace, who will be presenting From Slangting to Skanking in the Dancehall, a case study of the impact that second wave Jamaican reggae had on the British sound system culture. And we have Justin Koo. Did I pronounce that correctly? I want to love you, but we need copyright to treat you right. That's a twist. So I think most of us are inside. I think I see some of my students, my undergraduate students. I have to big them up wherever they are. I'm sure they're here to learn from you. And so I'm going to ask the first, the presenters of the first paper, first presentation, to begin their presentation. And I'll be timing you. Do we have a lot of time, Dr. Stanley Nye? I see you waving and carrying, you know. Do we have elongated timing since we have one less paper? We can give them extra time. 15 minutes per presenter, so they'll have a half an hour for 2 presenters.
Okay. We got a 15-minute, 2-second presentation.
And okay, so you have a 15-minute, 2 seconds. So I'm timing you. 15-minute, 2-second presentation. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Daniel Johnson. I'm an associate lecturer from the University of Northampton. My background is music. My journey has been music, and from a young age and coming up through the industry, and it led me to becoming a lecturer at the University of Northampton, which has given me the opportunity to research some of the situations and experiences that I went through myself. So it's a research and also a case study, and I'm doing it in collaboration with my colleague Roy Wallace.
Good evening. Thank you very much for staying on the graveyard shift. And yeah, so we made the precise presentation. I just finished it an hour ago here on campus. 15 minutes, 2 seconds. It's 99% there. There's a few things still need tweaked, but I'm sure you'll forgive us at this point. Yeah, I'm a senior lecturer in media production at University of Northampton, and I never really had a big interest in reggae until I met my colleague Daniel. But we did have a weird synergy that Daniel's father helped set up the Marafancanta movement.
Yeah, MFM, yeah.
Yeah, in Northampton, which my band allegedly played at one Saturday afternoon. We can't remember much, but we think it was there. But yeah, I come from a punk DIY background, and what really interests me is reggae activism. That's something that we'd like to explore further. But what we've done here is we've joined forces to make a presentation using the video essay form. And I can talk about that more in the Q&A if you want, but basically for me it's the repoliticization of narratives around particular histories. So, see what you think. Maybe we could switch the lights if that would be okay, if someone wouldn't mind. So yeah. Oh. Has someone got the lights, or is that them there?
We can see you. We've turned off the lights on this side. We can facilitate sides of that, but let's keep our hands on see.
Okay, is everyone okay then with the screen? Here we go.
From Slangting to Skanking in the Dancehall. This is our video essay from Daniel Johnson and Roy Wallace. Our research ambition is to look at the impact of the second wave Jamaican reggae on the British sound system culture, music production, and mainstream. Through comparative analysis of King Jammy's one-time girlfriend and contemporary remix version, Skanking in the Dancehall by Daniel Hustler D. Johnson. Tracing the journey, we intend to evidence the historical and ongoing relation between Jamaican and British reggae in the mainstream UK music industry, and explore the privileging of indigenous Jamaican music production over promotion of authentic UK reggae artists. We argue that while Jamaican reggae is visible on an international level, this incorporation of reggae into mainstream popular culture overshadows the authentic British reggae experiences. Here we look at the unique relationship between Jamaican reggae and its impact on British music and its popular cultures. From the slang rhythm out to Jamaica in the 1980s to music genres popular among the youth culture today in the United Kingdom. The influence reggae and sound system culture has had on the British mainstream that is not commonly acknowledged.
When Jamaican music first arrived here in the 60s, it spoke mainly to the West Indian community. Ska and early reggae were little more than novelties, though they offered a new soundtrack for the working class teens, black and white.
A lot of these influences has came through and been made popular by the British Caribbean community originated in Jamaica or flourished in Britain through the UK music industry.
Sorry about that.
The historical and ongoing relation between Jamaican and British reggae in the mainstream UK music industry, and explore the privileging of indigenous Jamaican music production over promotion of authentic UK reggae artists. We argue that while Jamaican reggae is visible on an international level, this incorporation of reggae into mainstream popular culture overshadows the authentic British reggae experiences. Here we look at the unique relationship between Jamaican reggae and its impact on British music and its popular cultures. From the slang rhythm out to Jamaica in the 1980s to music genres popular among the youth culture today in the United Kingdom. The influence reggae and sound system culture has had on the British mainstream that is not commonly acknowledged.
When Jamaican music first arrived here in the 60s, it spoke mainly to the West Indian community. Ska and early reggae were little more than novelties, though they offered a new soundtrack for the working class teens, black and white.
A lot of these influences has came through and been made popular by the British Caribbean communities who in many instances are overlooked as they are not in the mainstream. Therefore, the celebrity figures who are in the mainstream are credited for these influences and making them popular. In many cases, these celebrities are not from Jamaican or Caribbean heritage, which tells a different story and can lose the authentic essence behind the music and the culture.
Northampton's former Salvation Army citadel was standing empty, awaiting demolition until the occupation began a fortnight ago. Now, it's the centre of day-long activity for members of the Amata Fankanta youth movement. Most of the members are black, most were born in this country, and most are on the dole. A few are homeless. They moved in after a long and fruitless search for premises which they could legally use, driven off the streets, they say, by boredom and abuse from passers-by. Now they provide recreation facilities, including drama and music groups, sports teams, and religious and cultural studies. The movement's vice chairman is a 29-year-old agricultural student, Lee Bryant.
We came in here so that the young people of Northampton, especially the young black people of Northampton, would have a day centre where they could do something constructive in the days instead of wasting their time hanging about the streets and in the Grosvenor Centre and possibly even the bookie shops and pubs.
The case study of Skanking in the Dancehall shows the journey and the long-standing relationship between Jamaica and its relatives in the UK. I was born in a place where money was scarce like the folding of a plate. Down to sugar water was a treat. On a side where we use brush with teeth. We know about separation, we know about being poor. Appreciate the nickel and shall we give it more. So we can make a change, that's only just a race. And we take up the music and they take Let's look at some of the influences. One of the most recent being the dancehall beat, which we have seen being adopted by various genres.
I'm bringing a flavor, I think also, boop, 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 you know, with the mixing thing. So
let's reverse a little bit. Because you just said something that is very, 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 very important. The art of mixing down a rhythm that we often nowadays take for granted. You were the first person to actually do that.
On song.
On a sound system. Which pretty much when you hear the DJs DJing or the music playing.
We used to use it. We used to do it.
You should have seen me in a winter bush. Everyone hold your foot. And the downtown fussy you feel of your passport. Yeah, down fussy you feel of your passport.
Them are the dance to the things we have to keep. Put the dance to the key and turn them in a donkey. Yes, them are the dance to the things we have to keep. Put the dance to the key and turn them in a donkey.
Simma, who got the keys to my bimma? Who am I? The girl them sugar up your nine. Make love to a fella in your eye. Pass me the keys to my body. I'm in love with your body. I'm in love with your body.
The sound system concept itself, being a DJ producer, pioneered by the likes of Cox and Dodd with his Cox and Downbeat sound system that replays our music recorded and produced at his Studio One recording studio. Likewise, Duke Reed with his children's sound system, playing music he recorded at his Treasure Isle studios. And we've seen this model continue into the 80s with sounds like King Jamis, Volcano, and many others. This model was also exercised in the UK by the UK reggae sounds, such as Sir Coxon, Saxon, Jashaka, and many more on a smaller scale. Today we see this model adopted by most genres popular within the rave culture, such as EDM, house, trance, drum and bass, dubstep, grime, and many others. In the mainstream, it's now known as its own genre, the DJ producer, and it's been responsible for many #1 worldwide hits over the last decade, with acts such as Calvin Harris, who has produced songs for the likes of Rihanna, Chris Brown, Rita Ora, Kylie Minogue, and many more. Looking at production skills, dub music is one of the earliest influences on record for the styles we see used in modern day EDM. The Jamaican dub from the early 1970s was known for remixing songs, emphasizing rhythm sections, chopping vocals and instruments, using reverb and delay to create textures. These same arrangements we see used in EDM style genres today.
A new generation and revolutionize the creative process.
If we look at the form, the delivery, how the music is performed, the live mix, sound effects, and additional instrument sounds, the role of the engineer on the sound system, hence the specialized bespoke preamp with built-in echo chambers and effect units. Today we see EDM producers perform their music live in concert called a live PA, which uses the same concept. Generally, rave-style genres are produced for playback by DJs, who will then create seamless selection of tracks, which they call a mix, which is the same concept of the rhythm juggling, which we have seen in dancehall for decades, where various artists would record different songs on the same backing track that DJs would then seamlessly mix together, creating that same continuous mix. And before having the dual turntables to be able to create the mix live, this would be created in the studios when it is then pressed. So when it's played in a dance, it can then go into the next version of the song, as we see with the 12-inch disco vinyls, which would go from the main song into the dub version.
So she's gonna be up from the time, we'll get her in and a little chat and a little see what go on with her. She's gonna be up from the time, we'll get her in and a little
Looking at key
chat.
attributes, such as the language. Today there are many phrases that are used in the English dialect, heard on TV, radio, among all classes of people. These are phrases like mash up, big up, which has directly came from the patois and made popular through the music. Big up is the popular phrase used in dancehall over the years. Heard on sound tapes, heard on dubplate intros, heard live in the dance, heard at concerts, and many other reggae environments. Likewise, the terminology, mashup, terminology used in patois for as long as we can trace back. Another key attribute to the music and the culture is the dubplate, which has become a phenomenal concept. Within the reggae industry, it is one of the main income sources for artists. It is also one of the key tools to establishing the brand of some of the world's greatest sounds. Likewise, the concept has been adopted in a wide range of different music genres. In the UK, we have seen the terminology used in the title of a TV series entitled Dubplate Drama, aired on British television. The concept and the culture is traced back to Jamaica, but with no real pinpoint to who are the real pioneers of this concept. Analyzing information from some key figures in the industry directs us to Jamaican sounds in the UK.
Well, the first dubplate I cut, remember that there are two types of dubplate. There's a dubplate which is an exclusive recording, then there's a personalised dubplate with your name in it. The first dubplate I cut in Jamaica was Loving Unity by Michael Prophet. It was mixed by King Tubby himself, and Jammy was there. And that was in 1979, my first trip to Jamaica. And then a little bit later on, about a year after that, I started being given dubplates, which were glorified jingles, long jingles by various artists, and that's where the whole dubplate culture thing kicked in with other sound systems. So in a sound clash, you have to have your name in a dubplate, otherwise you're disqualified. So it's a bizarre culture, but it is another culture.
So, I don't know if you know where the idea came from, you know. In the olden days, you used to have a lot of sound system in England, and to a lesser amount, you know, the US stuff. But when them guys have any major dance to keep in England, what they will do is fly up an artist or two, because them couldn't afford to bring up the artists and keep them full time on them, because it's too expensive. Right. But later on, they realized that this was costing too much. And then they started to come down here and get the artists them to voice a dub for them. And then carry it over there and play it as a special in the dance. So some of our local sound started to see sound system playing over there and I play a dub.
We bust every reggae artist. We know that the reggae was founded in Jamaica, my country where I come from. But the reggae industry and business, money business, run here in England. We bust reggae music here in England, right? And turn reggae business into billion-pound business here in England.
What we're talking about here is something that happened in 1984. Yourself, 84, 85, this is yourself and Wayne Smith are almost like playing around on this little Casio keyboard. Yeah. Whose keyboard was it?
It was mine. It was brought to me by, you have a group called the Wailing Souls. You have a member, Gatti. They went overseas, and a virgin named Bonnie sent the Casio from, because he came to Jamaica and saw me. There was time when I used to be down Waterhouse playing music. With you know, melodica, the one you blow, that's what I have.
It was just what about funky bed, that was a special. Okay, all right. You know, without a name calling in it. So when I did it now, I said, you know what? This tune here, wicked, I should catch it on a cassette. So I put in the cassette and recorded the special. You know? So when I recorded the special, I called Tennessee afterward. I said, Tennessee, you can't come back tomorrow and do the song for me. Yeah. I love this song, you know. Yeah, yeah. You know? He said, yeah, but we need some money, you know. So I gave him $8 grand, you know. $8 grand? Yeah, so he went to country, and he came back on Saturday, was to do the recording, but he couldn't sing it like how he sang it on the day before. Couldn't find the note. So I played back the cassette for him and said, you know what happened? I will use this cut. And I just put it back to 8-track and EQ it up, and then, you know, that was the release, the cassette. And the rest is history.
For us, the question is, who deserves to be credited for some of these phenomenal concepts? who is seen as authority figures within the reggae industry that deserve the acknowledgement and even part ownership that their say is valid. And furthermore, to be officially documented that in years to come, the history is not lost and the story is authentic and not fabricated. And through the journey of the Windrush generation, Britain has a large part of the story of reggae and the culture and its development. And there's a need for more academic research into the history and the experiences of the Jamaican and the British reggae relationship. Recognition of the authentic UK contribution to the music and culture whose roots originated in Jamaica but flourished in Britain through similar activities and sound system models.
And of course, we're going to have questions at the end of the session for Roy and for Daniel. So now we're going to have our second presentation. I think this is going to be a regular presentation. There's a PowerPoint that we need to set up, so let us have that. All right. And so Justin Cool.
That's fine.
That's fine?
Yeah, sorry. I don't need it.
Just use the...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's cool.
Uses the arrows.
I want to love you, but we need copyright to treat you, right? And this is Justin Koo from the Faculty of Law, St. Augustine campus. Please go ahead, Justin.
Afternoon, everyone, or actually evening as we're getting into the sun going down. As I mentioned earlier, it's a graveyard shift. So I'm just going to try and keep everyone's attention by talking about something that's very, very important. So whenever we think about copyright law, we always think about negative things. Oh, I have to pay these people money. Or, you know, they're just money hungry. You know, they're exploiting other people. But I think my presentation today picks up squarely from the earlier presentation. I'm really glad that one of the questions they ended with is, who documents reggae history? Who can attribute, or who can be attributed as a source or the creator of certain aspects of reggae? And that's what the latter part of my presentation today is going to focus on. So I'm going to talk about two things today. Firstly, the relationship of reggae and copyright law, because it has a very, very particular, nuanced history, which I think most people don't appreciate, and copyright law today doesn't necessarily take proper account of. One of the earlier talks today, incidentally by Larissa, spoke about the idea of originality and reggae, and not just reggae, but other cultural contributions in music. What does that question of originality mean for reggae music? Reggae music, as we all know, was originally built on earlier forms, ska, mento, etc. And those things borrowed from other sources. So the question is, going forward, should copyright and reggae have a relationship? And if so, what sort of relationship should they have? Right, so I'm going to explore that a little bit. The second thing I'm going to talk about is creating a digital reggae hub. This is where we can store, preserve, conserve, and take reggae into the future. So that picks up squarely off the last presentation. So why am I going to talk about copyright? What's the importance of copyright? What's the importance of copyright to reggae? And putting this particularly in the jurisdiction of Jamaica, the copyright or the creative industries contribute some $464 million to the local economy. This figure was taken in 2005. It's the last sanctioned figures we have coming from WIPO. So think about it this way. That was in 2005, before the advent of the internet really taking place for music services, etc. That figure is probably double or triple by now, especially with the rise of new reggae artists such as Chronix, Protégé, etc. So the reality is that this figure is probably significantly underinflated, right? That amounted to nearly 5% of the GDP of Jamaica. That's a not insignificant amount. And the reason I say not insignificant is because of the untapped potential that is reggae and reggae music. But when we think of reggae, we only think of, you know, people singing, we think about the bass line, we think about the, you know, the stringed instruments. But reggae is not just the music. Reggae is so much more than that. So the question is, what aspects of reggae can we latch on to and take further? So as I mentioned, you know, reggae is the music. Yes, we understand reggae is music. But we have physical and digital recordings. That's just one aspect, and that's the aspect that most people focus on. But there are other aspects of reggae that copyright relate to. So reggae music videos. You see them on YouTube, we look at them constantly on a daily basis. We can use those and exploit those in more detail, right? What about reggae composition? That is the person who write the music, the person who write the lyrics. Are they taken into account by copyright law? Are they taken into account when we talk about reggae music generally? The question is, an open one which we can come back to at the end in the Q&A, but the reality is that most people don't focus on the people behind the scenes, and copyright also has a part to play with them, right? What about all the live concerts that takes place? Buju just came out of jail, he's going to put on a big concert. Is that going to be broadcasted online? Should that be broadcasted online and have an international audience, not just a Caribbean local audience that can physically attend? How much more money could be made if that is live streamed? And people, just like we pay for boxing, we pay for football matches, etc., why can't we be streaming these things online and be earning greater revenue for the Jamaican economy? And by extension, this also applies to other countries. So for example, soca music in Trinidad or any of the other indigenous musics that we've been discussing throughout the day. And then finally, reggae is not just about music, it's also about merchandising, photographs, posters, souvenirs, all the paraphernalia that come alongside the reggae music. These are all aspects that are related to copyright and are the untapped potential. These are things that we can build on and make more money off of and boost the economy, boost the platform on which reggae artists are put on, for example, putting them on a pedestal, in essence, right? Putting them on the mainstream. How do we get them from the current, not underground, but not at the mainstream, bridging the gap between the two? So I have a 4-point plan for reggae, right? So the 4-point plan, we need to have more effective copyright laws, not just in Jamaica, but in the Caribbean, right? And these copyright laws need to reflect the nuanced nature of reggae music, need to reflect the nuanced nature of soca music, need to reflect the nuanced nature of African music, for example, right? I'm just broad brushing here. The second point is we need to have viable business structures in place. The reality is that the business structure for the Caribbean copyright industries are largely, unfortunately, still cottage industry sized, right? We haven't got into the world stage benchmarks yet, right? Third point is we need cooperation of stakeholders. And I'll get back to this on a later slide when we look at all the parties involved in the process. The fourth thing that we need to recognize, and this, I'm so happy that this actually happened because it puts the Caribbean now further on the map. The idea, well not the idea, but the actual recognition that reggae is now an intangible cultural heritage item to be protected for the entire world for the sake of humanity, right? That puts reggae on a platform much more significant than any other form of music in the region. Even though I'm Trini, I will say that, right, reggae has now outstripped every other aspect in the Caribbean, right? Soca music now has to look to reggae to be the next big thing coming out of the Caribbean. But the reggae is now seen as the premier music in the Caribbean, premier music on the Western Hemisphere. So what do we need to do? So it's like I said, from the 4-point plan, it's 2 things that we need to do. We need to bolster our copyright laws, and we need to establish a reggae hub. Right, so I'm going to look at these 2 in detail. So in terms of copyright law issues, the reality is that rights awareness is very poor. Artists, creators, singers, pub owners, rum shop owners, anyone who is involved in the music process, their general awareness about IP laws are very poor. That's the reality, right? This, however, has to be fixed starting with on the educational front. We need to start in schools. We need to start educating individuals about the rights specifically under copyright law and how copyright law relates to the work that they may do in the future or the work that they're currently doing. What rights they get from their work. And this is to inspire the next generation of creators, the next generation of reggae singers, the next generation of any copyright industry. And like I said, in the Caribbean, it's not being done at the moment. So this is something that, for example, the IPO of Jamaica, JIPO, should be looking to do in more detail. The next thing we need to do is clarify the scope of the communication to the public, right? When we think about copyright law, we only think about one thing, stopping copying. But with the advent of the internet age and the internet and digital dissemination, reproduction is no longer the issue, right? Copying is just one part of the copyright law. The other part is sharing works on the internet. This is where the battle is now. And the reality is that even though we have this right in Jamaica, we have this right in Trinidad and several other Caribbean countries, We have no idea what it means here. We have no idea how it's going to work, but yet we want to get our music out there in further detail. So what we have to do is clarify the scope of this right and be proactive in how it's going to be employed. Be proactive so that investors would want to come in and commit their money to the music that we have, right? Even though it's about communication to the public now, it's still the case that reproduction in the Caribbean is still very much unclear. When you look at the case law, there's no clear framework for proving reproduction infringement. And this is despite years and years and years and years of cases and borrowing from the UK framework and the US framework, we're still very much unclear about the scope of the right in the Caribbean. And this goes for Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, all the other islands. So the reality is that we need to clarify our legal system, clarify the legal frameworks, and make it clearer to not just the artists who are involved, the right holders, the owners, etc., but also to those who are outside who may want to benefit or may want to help aid the growth of reggae. We need to clarify our copyright laws. That's the reality. And then finally, and this touches on a point that we looked at, was discussed earlier, the idea of exceptions and limitations, in particular sampling exceptions. The reality is that Caribbean music very much, even though it has grown into its own thing now, was originally based on sampling. Take us back 100 years ago, reggae may not have existed if we're in the current legal framework. It would have been deemed copyright infringement, would have been killed dead in its tracks, right? But we've come off of that. So now we've pioneered our own path. The reality is that to create the next generation, we should encourage our young creators to not just look forward, but as we've said before, to look backward. And looking backward means drawing on references to the past. But the question is, how can we do that in a system that is very onerous, as traditional copyright law is very onerous? So we should forge our own path for copyright law, make our own exceptions and limitations that benefit our own people. We shouldn't just be borrowing copyright laws from the developed countries, from the international treaties that don't care about us, don't account for us, right? We need to forge our own hybrid legal path. And that's one of my, coming back to UE, because I did my studies in the UK, going back to UE, that's one of my aims, to try and pioneer this idea of a hybrid copyright framework in the Commonwealth Caribbean. That's one of my main goals. So shifting attention now to the Reggae Hub. What's its broad aims? Before we get into specifically what it will do, what is it there for? Well, we need to preserve culture. Coming off the back of UNESCO, being included under the UNESCO Heritage List, we need to preserve reggae. And like the previous video essay talked about, who did what is a very important question, right? And the reality is that in many cases, we don't know who did what. So in order to preserve culture for the future, we should understand where we came from. And the Reggae Hub will, in part, do that. It will also help with the exploitation of works. And when I say exploitation, this is not a negative term. This means helping reggae artists, etc., reggae right holders to use their works to get financial reward. Yes, making music is great. Yes, listening to music is great, but the music is not going to feed us. Money is also a very heavy part of the situation. So we need to exploit works in a more effective way. And in doing that, it will prove to be an incentive and incentive for creation and innovation, right? Encouraging people to make more works. It will also provide a way for foreign investors to look to see a system of, develop a system of confidence in the music industry. They would see that there's something set up, something firm, concrete, and established that we can invest in and be secure in our investments. And lastly, copyright law, music, reggae, etc. It's not just about mainstream selling music. It's also about other sectors. We can have music tourism, right? And tourism is a very important part of the Caribbean, so there's a necessary need to link it together. We can link them together, and we should. So what will the Reggae Hub do? It will firstly provide a system of registration. We should have a registry of all persons involved in reggae music, from the writers of the music, to the writers of the lyrics, to the ones who record, and the persons who actually own the tracks. Whether we're talking about masters or anything else, we should have a note about who owns what. That way, anytime you want to deal with reggae, you can go to the Reggae Hub, find out who owns it, and then be able to exploit it. It's a one-stop shop in that sense. The second thing we want to do is build a repository. And this is for the preservation of reggae. Every single recorded reggae song should form part of the repository. Just like the Library of Congress, we should have some system where people can have reggae and save it for the future, right? the Reggae Hub should also be a center for facilitating exploitation, meaning licensing and assignment, especially for those smaller artists or breakthrough artists who will not necessarily have the resources to afford a good lawyer or have any sort of copyright or contractual savviness. So the Reggae Hub should afford them the opportunity to get bigger. And then lastly, it should be the source of information for education. Learning about reggae is part of our culture, and this goes for any other sort of music. We should understand what our culture and our heritage is, and it should provide the means to build a research and development hub about reggae. So anything you want to know about reggae, the information should be there or be accessible through there. And that should, whether it's partnered with UE or some other institution, be the benchmark for scholars going forward talking about reggae. They should have a system and a source of information that they can build on. And for example, if you wanted to do a PhD on reggae, the Reggae Hub would be your go-to spot, for example. So who are the people involved? Well, there are tons of people involved, and this is a real difficult part, getting them to all come together and collaborate. The reality is, for example, the music people, they don't necessarily like the persons who own their masters. The people who want to play the music in the rum shop or in the pub don't necessarily like the people who own the rights. The public, they don't see the reason why I should pay for any music, right? So the question is, how do we bring all of these people together? And that's the hard part. Bringing them together and getting them to sit down and talk and go forward for the benefit of whatever type of music, in this case, reggae we're talking about. So I've identified, I know I'm running out of time, so I've identified 4 limitations which, we need to think about. And this is not just about the Reggae Hub, but in general. How do we preserve reggae going forward? There's a need for more investment. People need to invest money, right? Whether it's the case that we have better recording equipment, better rights awareness for artists, etc., we need money. That's the reality, right? Is there going to be a conflict with existing structures? Is there anything that's competing that's already doing part of this? Yes, there are things that, for example, CMOs in particular, collective management organizations, where copyright is vested so that they collect on behalf of artists. Is it the case that they're going to collaborate with the Reggae Hub, for example? And the answer might be no at this point in time. And there's a lot of debate going on with the role of CMOs. And it's a huge issue in Trinidad. I know it's a huge issue in Jamaica with Jaipo in particular fighting JCAP. It's always a constant fight. So the question is, can we bring them together? So that takes care of stakeholders generally as well. How do we bring them together? And then finally, legal development. No one wants to invest in a system that is legally defunct or where the law is behind the technology. That does not inspire confidence in an investor or in an investment. So the question is, whose place is it to bring the legal developments? That, unfortunately, largely falls on our politicians, and they may not have a huge political will to push the music forward. They may not have a huge political will to push the copyright law or any other IP law forward. So it really has to fall on the lobbyists, which would include from the base level, the musicians, all the way up to the right holders to push for more legal certainty, push for better laws, better enforcement, etc. So what's the next steps in terms of trying to make this Reggae Hub a reality? Well, we need to talk to the stakeholders, gauge their interests, engage them in terms of real discussion, right? We need to do a feasibility study. How feasible is this going to be? Is there a need for it? Whether it's the case that, reggae artists are actually going to be interested in something like this, whether reggae historians are going to be interested in something like this. What role will it play in going forward? Start developing an actual practical framework for it. What's going to happen at the ground level, how it's going to work, who's it going to benefit? These are the questions we need to start asking about. And then finally, again, the most difficult issue, finding money. If it's not going to come from the government, who's it going to come from? We're going to have to obviously seek private investors, which is going to be difficult to convince. Right. So I see I have no more time. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Justin, and of course, for a very exciting presentation. I see the students were taking a lot of notes. You can use them in your courses, yes. And of course, you can also speak with the presenter at the end of the session. We are opening the floor for questions to both, well, on both presentations. We have 3 presenters. And so I'm opening the floor for comments and questions. How many minutes do we have left? I'll take a few questions and some comments before we wrap up, as people keep saying we're on the graveyard shift. It's been a long day for most of us. Questions, yes?
Yes, this is in relation to the first presentation, because I was waiting to hear more from the second wave Jamaican artists or second generation in England, their contribution to dancehall. So I was wondering, I didn't hear about Papa Levi, I didn't hear about Smiley culture. So I was waiting to hear about the impact of some of these, you know, second generation British artists, their impact on the dancehall genre. So, you know, I don't know if you have any comments on that. They just seem to be conspicuously missing from the work. Yeah.
Although I think it's in the title, it was a case study between the Jammy song and what Daniel had done. So trying to put everything into 15 minutes, as anyone presenting today will know, is quite a difficult task, because there's so much that you want to talk about. So I appreciate your comments that there's quite a lot not in our presentation, but that's for an ongoing discussion and evolution around the particular history and how that's told. I don't think we could have done that today, but part of what we did here today was also, sorry Daniel, part of what we were doing today was also a bit of an experiment around video essay. As you can see, there were some glitches. It was actually 15 minutes 42 seconds because I messed up the start, but yeah, we're experimenting with this form as much as the actual narrative that's in it, but I think Daniel wants to respond to as well.
Yeah, that was part of it. We didn't get the chance to highlight everyone, like Roy said. But obviously, when like what we were saying is what I find in the UK, it's the people like Papa Levi come right up. Yeah, we know that influence the music. But what we're saying is, it's like the people who are credited for influencing the music over in the UK. Like in the media will highlight Jamaica because it can't go around Jamaica. But then the people, what it puts up front to highlight that these are the people who are pushing this culture. As you said, Papa Levi, where is all them people? There's too much to mention. You understand? There's Papa Levi come right up. Like I said, like this is a research for me because my journey has led me into the academic settings. But I'm also like I said, I'm a musician, so I come through that, like the section where you're seeing when the youngsters squatted and got a building. I don't know who knows England much, but anyone who knows England, like throughout the 70s and the 80s, would know a venue named MFM. It was one of the most popular venues for reggae music. That was that building. That was my father and my uncles and the elders what grew me, because they never had nowhere. So what they ended up having to do, they squatted and got that building. That's why they was on the news, because they squatted and got the building. And the government tried to take the building away from them, but legally there was a law where you could squat and it becomes yours if you stay in there for a certain amount of time. So them, when they done that and they got the building, enough stories they went through and thing, enough for the artists, enough for the sound systems. Everyone pass you. Anywhere I go and I tell people I'm from Northampton, first thing they say, MFM, MFM. All of the big sounds, all of the artists from Jamaica, from the UK, that was one of the main spots where they went. You understand? So these people have been keeping the culture going. Same way like I started playing sound from when I was 11-year-old. And when I'm playing, I'm going to school with English and all different kind of nationalities. And me and my brethren them was making cassette tapes and selling them at school. So we're continuing this legacy, and we was showing this culture over to the other communities and other nationalities. We was keeping this alive, but because we're not in the mainstream, we don't get that credit. And then because someone who's on Radio 1 may play or say this, they're then credited for giving these people, like giving the pushing this culture and making this culture popular in the UK, but they're missing all of the pockets Because there's, yeah, like you said, there's Papa Levi, there's enough of them. Every town, there's DJs, MCs, what was big in their town, and it was going on in the communities, and it's been going on from, it never stopped. It's been going on from them until now. So yeah, it's something where we never get the chance to put it in there as such, but it's all part and parcel of it.
Question? Okay. And I don't know your name, sir, and I can't see your card, so. Yeah. Hi, Kevin, right?
Yes, all that was really cool. I have a question for Justin, though. How do you feel that the instrumentalists are going to fit into the ideas that you had? I felt the ideas were very good, and I don't think it's unique to reggae music, but we know in the studio, at least I know in the studio environment, there's a lot of collaboration going on, and the instrumentalists are usually not even being listed on the records. So how do they fit into the models that you proposed?
Right, so that's a very good question. So I think it's a two-part answer. The first part must come from copyright law to begin with. And the reason why most people aren't listed in the tracks is because when they're hired as instrumentalists, they're hired as set musicians or day musicians.
Mm-hmm.
So they make no copyright contribution to it. They're just playing music that is normally written already, right? That's the argument coming from the persons who would own the copyright in it. It's a different question if they're on the set doing impromptu music creation, which then raises a copyright question. We see several cases from the UK in particular on this, about that sort of situation when you create music on the set, ad-lib, and then it goes into the track. Are they also copyright owners? And the answer has generally been yes, if that's the case. However, set musicians that just play the music that is given to them, they're not making a copyright contribution, an original contribution. Mm-hmm. And from that perspective, they're not given any rights. But I do agree with you. If someone makes a contribution to a track like that, they should get some recognition. This is where moral rights need to come in stronger. And the general ideas on moral rights in the common law countries, so we're talking about the Commonwealth Caribbean, the UK, etc., moral rights is very weak. Artists don't get the recognition that they sometimes deserve or that sometimes the law should warrant. So it might be the case that, for example, again in the Caribbean, to give credence to people who make real contributions to their music, because some set musicians would make contributions to significant tracks and a significant number of tracks. There should be some, again, information that, is stored where, X and Y and Z played on this track, or the backtrackers for this track. And again, something like the Reggae Hub can facilitate that. So it's, like I said, it's a dual answer in terms of recognition on a formalistic sense, and as well, copyright law in the Caribbean might need to evolve to include that, for example.
Well, I have your hand, then I have Ashanti, and I think we'll try and take you as the last one. So you go ahead, yes.
Obviously, I have many things that I'm thinking, so I will be short. But I did have two quick points. One, and I'm really glad to hear the story you're telling about coming up with your sound system and with the rise of British music, because a lot of the things you talk about, say squatting and cassette tapes, homemade cassette tapes, right? These are ways that people violated property law, copyright law, also pirate radio, that were integral to the flourishing of British music and British Jamaican music, right? And so in some ways, again, we might think about what is it that's being fostered in those spaces, and how could we incorporate that if we are going to revise the copyright law? So both inclusion, but also maybe decriminalization, like not looking at certain things, not allowing, not scrutinizing or fixing certain things, letting, because the squatting law doesn't say anybody can take anybody's house, but it says if you get in without breaking anything and the place has been empty and the owner's not using it, after a while you get a right. And actually in Jamaica, I think there's, I remember when there were houses squatted all along one of the highways they were building about 10 years ago, and when they built the highway, they put in driveways to all those houses that were not there legally, right? So somebody was like, oh, well, people are there. Maybe we should give them a road. So I think this is a metaphor maybe for some of how to think about copyright law. Like some of the things that people are doing now don't fit with the law, so can we give them a road? Can we can we find a way to bring them in a way that doesn't just crush where they are? We don't want to take the house away, I don't think, because there's beautiful things, there's music in this house. You know, so I think thinking of those dynamics is really interesting. And then also to your point on session musicians, the question too. I mean, the UK just revised its copyright law to create a right for session musicians that is not tied to measuring like, oh, what percentage did you contribute and how valuable. They just said, you know what, they need to get paid. We're going to say this percentage of, and then in the US too, if a song does really well, you know, there's a law, not if it does well, but after 35 years, right, the copyright can be bought back by the original artist if you've assigned it. These are steps away from this permanent fixed property law that I think we can look to because, and this is my last point, I'm sorry, I know I'm very excited. I also would say it's not just new technology that the law is behind. I think the old way that Jamaicans have been making music is actually, was ahead of its time. People were pioneering things which are now circulating online, but all those traditions came out of actually sound system culture. So all of the things that people say, oh, the internet let people copy and share and circulate, and that was all happening on vinyl with the pressing to a vinyl record with the version on the B-side, you know? So I think actually this is a site to look for inspiration to how to revise copyright law better. I'll shut up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I actually got the out of time indicator from our timekeeper at the back, and we are trying to put in, could we make our comment or question precise so that if we are expecting a response from any of the presenters, they are able to do so before we all get fatigued. Yes, thank you.
Give thanks, Prof. No problem now then. Let me just...
You have a long epistle thing there.
Yeah, but I'm going to try to really make it really, really short. I just want to compliment and commend the presenters. I love the UK vibe because, you know, me up on the scene and I see the progression too. And really and truly, really bridging that gap more between Jamaica and UK really needs to be done because it really, really, really is a critical part of the history. Now on to my bridging, you know, Mr. Cool. You know, you mentioned some things and I like them. One of the things I wanted to ask you though, when you speak about the sharing of files, and Prof Man kind of did a touch upon it too still. From the legal standpoint, how do you really see that taking shape? How do we really protect that? Because I've seen a whole heap of debates going on in different courts and jurisdictions in the United States about this issue. How do you see that manifesting in Jamaica? One, two, you mentioned hybrid copyright framework for the region. How you really see that panning out, considering that even some of our own artists and producers prefer the overseas system because they've criticized things like JCAP. How do we get around that Achilles heel? And then thirdly, in Jamaica we have a national library where we are being encouraged to deposit our things and it's taking place, but the culture still needs to grow. Does that not obtain in Trinidad? And is it really a matter of just sensitizing the public of the institutions that we have that do this work as opposed to creating something new in like your Reggae Hub?
All right, so I think there's a lot of things to respond to this. I'll take the last point first. Yes, I'll take the last point first. So I'm aware that, and this pertains particularly to literary works, because the idea in the Caribbean is this West Indiana library, where we collect all the Caribbean works and put them into one spot. And the reality is for music, even though it might be encouraged, I don't think a lot of people out there know it's there or it's to be happening. So again, it comes back to education. You need to start making the general public aware of this, the layman in the road aware of this, school system aware of this. So it has to be a holistic, comprehensive educational approach to copyright law, and cultural preservation aspects related to the arts, whether it's writing, music, dance, whatever the case is, right? Sharing of files online. So I'll take the first point second. There's no way to contain it, really and truly, right? That is it. We have TPMs, which is technological protection measures. That hasn't worked. Right, the minute that you make a lock, someone comes along 2 seconds later and picks the lock, right? So how do we do anything about that? So actually, in the UK, what they have now is live injunctions. And this was targeted particularly at pirate football streams online. So you can get a live injunction and they can shut down the stream as it's happening. So we're seeing measures being developed, not to stop it, but to make it less effective. Make piracy less available, right? We see legitimate streaming platforms like Netflix, starting to take a hold and makes it a lot easier to access content. I think the reality of the problem for piracy is access to content is one of the biggest problems. Costs being a huge issue. The average person can't afford it, If you can't afford it, then you're going to look to the next way to get it, i.e. get it for free, pirate it, right? So again, it's awareness. Would people still do it if they know it was wrong? I think the answer is yes, they'd still do it. But we need to put measures in place that at least makes it more difficult. It's not going to stop. That's reality. We've seen that from piracy in the 17th century with the printing press to now. It's not a new problem for the internet, right? So it's just a matter of making it more difficult, making it less attractive. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Justin and Asante, for keeping it precise. And we are going to give the final question. So your point was, okay. We can speak to the presenters after the session has ended, but Dr. Stanley Naya has gone over to the regional office where I was all day today. So she has asked me to close off the session, close off today, and to thank everyone who has participated. Thank you for sharing with us, for being a part of the session. Thank all the presenters and, of course, all the members of the team who have kept us running. Great and exciting day, and I'm encouraging you to engage in some breather activities. It's Valentine's Day, I gather. I'm sure none of us remember that. Right, and so to have some activities. One activity that you can find, I don't know what happened to my mic. Did I squeeze something? Yes, I did. I didn't squeeze anything because I didn't touch it. And of course, back tomorrow for another exciting day of activities. That's going to run longer because remember that tomorrow you have the Bob Marley lecture at 7. So you have a longer day tomorrow. So get ready for a very exciting day, jam-packed with activities. Thank you so much, and do have a good evening. Thank you.
So that one.